Hello and welcome to Clinical Edge. Today's guest is Jim Marino, an orthopedic surgeon who founded Trinity Orthopedics, a medical device company focused on developing surgical technologies designed to improve patient outcomes while reducing procedural complexity and cost. One of Trinity's key innovations is the Corex bone harvester. We'll know more about bone harvesting from Dr. Jim, which is what I understand is a minimally invasive device designed to improve bone graft harvesting efficiency while reducing complications associated with traditional procedures. I'm getting too technical, but Jim, welcome to the podcast and really excited to have you here.
Thank you, Anirudh.
Jim, tell us about your background and your industry journey and what led you into the orthopedic and medical device industry.
Sure. So I was born in Bronx, New York, and grew up in New Jersey. Spent most of my youth in New Jersey before going to college in Boston at Tufts University and then on to med school at Howard University, and then my orthopedic internship and residency at the University of California, San Diego. I was the second of four boys in my family. My father was a physicist who worked for the federal government in Defense Department. And he instilled in all of us, but particularly I think in myself, a great interest in science and deductive reasoning and curiosity, all, I'll say, elements that are, I think, a natural fit for somebody who eventually wants to develop new ideas and be an inventor. And at the age of 2, I contracted poliomyelitis, which is a nerve, I'll say, disrupting viral infection that paralyzed my 2 lower legs and temporarily left me unable to walk. But I did recover some, particularly in my right leg. My left leg has always been profoundly weak, but I was able to eventually go from walking in 2 braces to walking with no braces at all. And I've been able to walk since that period of time until present, although my capacity for walking has diminished considerably as I've gotten older, and my polio has, what they call post-polio syndrome, has affected my capacity for standing and walking. That's one of the reasons why I'm retired. I can't stand for the procedures any longer. But at a very early age, I identified with orthopedics as a professional, I'll say, objective. And of course, I was encouraged by my parents to pursue this. And I did everything I could to try to become an orthopedist as quickly as possible. I went through college in 3 years. I went through med school in 3 years, completed my internship and residency in the standard 1 year of internship, 4 years of residency. And I was a board certified orthopedist just before the age of 30, which is unusually young. I enjoyed what I trained to do, but I had this desire to improve whatever I was practicing. I had a couple of orthopedic partners who used to say that I never participated in a procedure I didn't want to change. And it's just, I don't know, it's just an inventive inclination, a curiosity that I had for trying to make things better. And I found that minimally invasive spine surgery was a ripe field for development. I had spent a lot of time developing my skills as an arthroscopist during my residency and in my early orthopedic practice, but I had so many patients with back pain, I realized I was going to have to reorient my clinical focus to the spine.
Yeah.
And I could see that many of the techniques that were rapidly evolving in the mid to late 80s in arthroscopy had a parallel with the field of spine surgery, although there was not a direct and obvious transfer. There was clearly enough of a lesson clinically to see that new techniques and instrumentation would open the possibilities of doing minimally invasive spine surgery. And I started to collect some of these ideas, and I was fortunate enough to have an encounter with a venture capitalist who heard them and thought they were worth investing in, and eventually started a company called NuVasive. NuVasive was a spine-focused medical device company, which eventually became a public entity and eventually was sold to a Globus Spine for over $3 billion. So it was a very successful company, of which I had some, I'll say, part in its early development. And since then, I founded another company called Trinity Orthopedics, where the money and the development path were not quite, I'll say, prosperous. We've been able to maintain our company through sales of our single product, which is a minimally invasive bone harvester. But we also have a number of other ideas that we're trying to advance, and hopefully one of these in the near future will provide us with some success. And as I understand it, your audience includes a lot of budding entrepreneurs in the MedTech field, and you asked me if I might impart some experiential words of wisdom.
We'll certainly come to it, but I really want to appreciate that when we had a talk last time, I didn't know that you had polio, and being a polio survivor or fighter, I would say, and then becoming an orthopedic surgeon and starting NuVasive and Trinity and still being active so much is really inspiring for not just budding entrepreneurs, but for those who go through polio or something similar things in their life. And
that's very kind of you to say. Very kind of you to say. But you know the expression, if life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And you have to play with the hand that you're dealt. And my physical disability, while it is profound, has given me, I think, certain advantages that you learn through life's lessons. When you're, I'll say, disadvantaged physically and you have to compensate, it makes you, I'll say, innovate and gives you, I'll say, a level of determination that others might not acquire since they're not faced with quite the same challenge.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Jim. So before even we get into what wonderful things Trinity is doing, I want to take a step back and try to understand what are the challenges what is grafting and what are the challenges associated in the orthopedic surgery domain?
Sure. In orthopedics, we have a number of applications in which we want bone to form. Sometimes we want bone to form inside of a cyst where there's a pathologic condition. We remove whatever is within the cyst, and usually, often they're benign. And then we have basically a compromised bone that is readily subject to fracture. And we want to rapidly promote bone incorporation. Traditionally, and I'm talking now traditionally, we would harvest bone from repositories in the body, which are usually in subcutaneous locations like the pelvis, typically the posterior pelvis, the iliac crest, the anterior pelvis, the greater trochanter, the proximal tibia, the calcaneus, the distal tibia. These are all areas, even the distal radius can be a site for harvesting small amounts of bone in hand surgery. But all these sites, usually they're almost all metaphyseal in nature. We can harvest the bone, and the void that's created from the harvest site will fill in most of the time. And we can take that bone and place it where we want to try to get bone to generate. As I said, sometimes we put it in a pathologic lesion like a cyst. Sometimes we use it when we're doing bone grafting to a compression fracture or a displaced fracture in which we need to basically support the restored height of the bone with underlying bone graft. Sometimes we get what is referred to as delayed unions or non-unions of fractures in which the bone doesn't heal in a, I'll say, either normal amount of time or heal at all. And sometimes we want to just fuse a joint because the joint is painful or unstable. In spine surgery, we do a lot of what we call interbody fusions between one vertebra and another. There are instances in a variety of other orthopedic applications where joints cannot be replaced with total joints. As in the knee and the hip, we have very good substitutes, artificial joints, and now the ankle. But we don't have very good substitutes for some other joints, and sometimes we need the durability that only a fusion can provide. So that's when bone grafting traditionally has been applied. And unfortunately, the techniques for harvesting bone in the past, which were open and I'll say maximally invasive, had a high incidence of what we referred to as donor site morbidity, persistent pain, or other ongoing symptoms at the site where the bone was harvested from. So to solve that problem, we came up with the COREX device, which is a minimally invasive surgical or MIS technique for harvesting bone from these various repositories, and we can do it percutaneously. That means without having to retract or do careful dissection after incising the skin. We just incise the skin, we insert the instrument down to the bone, and we have the tools all built into the device to harvest cancellous bone in cylindrical form. So that's what the COREX device does, and it can minimize or even eliminate postoperative morbidity. When I say eliminate the pain, and reduce the risk for infection dramatically. That's what the purpose of the device was, and we've sold over, I think, close to 40,000 of them.
Awesome. And what has been the feedback you've received from physicians using the technology? What do they say?
One of the challenges we've experienced is that it is user dependent. It's a manual tool. It's not fully automated. The surgeon has to actuate it and they have to operate it in a prescribed manner.
Is there any
And
training or something that you provide to them?
we actually have online videos. We also do, before they do any procedure, we send them a demonstration unit along with a practice block of, I'll just say, a simulator of bone, and we go over the technique with them. But in medical device development, it's one thing to have somebody demonstrate your product in front of you when they're focusing on it and concentrating, and after you have just instructed them. But it's another thing for them to do it in the midst of surgery when their primary focus might have been on other aspects of the surgery, and they will have been, I'll just say, laboring in the heat of battle, as we might say in spine, for several hours. And then when it comes to using your device, they may not completely remember everything that you taught them or that they saw on a video. So our experience has been that for the surgeons who get it and do it well initially, they are very pleased with it and they're repeat users. And for other surgeons who try it and don't quite get it and struggle with it, they may only use it once and never try it again. That's been our experience.
Amazing. Now I want to move to a little of the core part of our conversation is your entrepreneurial journey in this, because we have, a lot of people have amazing ideas, great technological ideas. They have a great strategic plan, 5-year plan, 10-year plan, everything they have. But the most important, the buck stops at the point where you have to get it started. Or maybe you have to leave your practice, or maybe you have to leave your job, something like that. Get the investment, get all people on board, and very importantly, get the clients on board. Like, How did you maneuver this whole journey?
Okay, so some of it is serendipity in my instance. I had some good ideas. I had shared them with one company, not all of them, but some of them. And that company was then acquired by a larger concern and they neglected to develop the idea. So I was able to retrieve my ideas, fortunately. And because they didn't perform according to the contractual conditions we had set in the acquisition. And I had been practicing full time as an orthopedist. So I wasn't spending a lot of time pursuing the financing, which is an important, very important component to seeing any medical technology ever achieve any success. But one of my orthopedic partners happened to have a parent meeting with his private school, and he met a venture capitalist physician who was not practicing, but who was a venture capitalist, but he was a trained physician. And he mentioned me and said that he thought I had some good ideas. And with just simply that, I'll just say, serendipitous meeting between my partner and this venture capitalist, I had a chance to present my ideas, and he liked them a great deal. And then he brought me to Palo Alto to share these with other venture capitalists. And eventually the company was financed and a large amount of money was raised. I think over $85 million was raised privately before the company became publicly funded. And then hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars were eventually made available with public financing. So I was lucky. And you're not going to be lucky, but I did learn enough about, I'll just say, medical device development to understand some of the things that could help a young aspiring entrepreneur to have more opportunity for success. And one of the things I would say is, first, you must recognize, no matter how much you believe in your idea, and no matter how good your idea is, it is not likely to succeed. And that's it's hard for somebody who hasn't been through this to understand. Even the very best of ideas, and there are some very good ideas that never see the light of day. And so I'm just going to try to bring this brutal reality to the forefront here. I would not quit a job that you really like and which is paying your bills and supporting your family. If you're in a position where this job is dear and very difficult to replace, my advice would be to spend some time in your entrepreneurial effort and yet fulfill your job responsibility so that you keep the lights on at home and feed your family and yourself and pay for your obligations.
Yeah, the difference comes in when you actually have to put in your resignation letter. That's the toughest part. If you don't have a job, it's the easiest thing to do.
Yes.
If you have a job, and if you have a good job, it's the toughest thing to do.
I would say I would be disinclined to resign until you had secured financing. Secured it, like money in the bank, not promises. And I would also caution young entrepreneurs, even though this is a very common path, to use friends and family money very cautiously. I want to tell you this. There's a good chance that whoever you receive money from, your aunt, your uncle, your grandmother, your father, your mother, your cousin, your brother, there's a very good chance that they will never see that money again. They will lose all of it. And they've put it in your hands. So remember that this sometimes can not only be disappointing, it can sour an otherwise very important relationship. And I can't emphasize this enough. There are professional investors at the earliest stages. There are people who have made enough money in their life that they're willing to take risks with it and are going to speculate on some ideas with the prospect that it might produce a very high return on their investment. But they're sophisticated and they have the money to lose. They may not want to lose it. Nobody wants to lose their money, but they understand that they don't need this money to put their kids through college, to pay their mortgage, to put food on the table. When you get an investor like that to put money into your enterprise, they will understand, if they're at all sophisticated, that there's a good chance they'll never see that money again. And then there's a small chance that they'll see a 15 to 20 times return in 3 to 5 years on their investment. So they expect a high return. They're not going to invest in your idea unless they see the potential for a high return. They're not looking for 6 or 8 or 10% per year. No, they're looking for 15 to 20 times return in 3 to 5 years.
Especially
and so these are angel investors.
Yeah.
And there are angel investor groups that you can identify in your area that usually they form syndication. Sometimes they'll put in each of them $50,000 or $100,000, and their syndicate might invest $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million on occasion into an idea if they think it's worthy. But they want to see that idea have a value of 10, 15, or 20 million or $30 million in 3 to 5 years. So understand that. Venture capitalists will rarely make an investment in an idea or a pre-revenue generating company. They're at the second tier of investment. Some people call their investment dollars smart money, and the angel investors are sometimes disparagingly called dumb money. But that's just what sometimes is used in the language, if you will, or the vernacular of these types of investments. But the venture capitalists will usually want to see an entity that has revenue. You don't have to be profitable. That they're not expecting profitability. That's nice, but not important. They want to see potential, and they're likely to come in at the 2 million would be the sort of minimum. Most of them would probably start at about $5 million up to $10 or $15 million in each round of financing. And there might be an A, B, C round of financing. And so in each successive round, they would like to see improvements or achievements or milestones that increase the value of your particular proposition. And then the amount of the percentage of equity acquired with subsequent dollars progressively diminishes if things are going well. And in the ideal situation, you usually have what's referred to as an initial public offering or an IPO. That doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, then people who invested 20 or 30 cents per share can realize 10, 15, or $20 per share at the time of the initial public offering. So this is a little bit about the money is very important.
Yeah.
And
but one thing I would like to get your perspective is, okay, getting money, yes, having the technology and expertise, yes, there's you. But then how did you maneuver the journey of getting the revenue, which is like getting the clients on board? How was that
right,
journey?
sometimes when you're in the field like I am as an orthopedist, your customers are colleagues. They're not necessarily people you know directly or in your proximity, but they're in your field. And so you talk their language. So if you're an orthopedist or you're a physical therapist, or if you're I don't know, physiatrist, there's a variety of medical disciplines you can talk about, cardiologists, etc. And you have an idea and you're going to be selling to people with your education, you have an immediate advantage because you can articulate the problem in a way that they will readily comprehend And hopefully you'll be able to describe how your solution addresses the pain point or the pain points in the care in a manner that will be readily understood by your colleague. And that forms the basis for your sales and marketing campaign. Basically, you're going to define the problem and you're going to try to demonstrate that your solution to this problem is worth their consideration, because they're likely to have to invest time and money in learning about your device or your technique and becoming familiar enough to use it in their practice. And they're going to have to convince their facility, usually a hospital or outpatient surgery center, to buy the product. That's also a relatively hard challenge.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a value added committees or VAC committees that screen new medical devices at hospitals and ambulatory surgery centers, and they don't want to spend their money unless they can see a clear advantage. And often that advantage isn't just simply improved patient care, it's economic advantage. All these things have to be kept in mind, but you don't have to know it all at the beginning. If you have a good idea and you can secure some of the money, that money helps bring on other competent people who can help you with this process. Sales and marketing people primarily.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I think after having everything in place, that's the most important and critical part, because you might have a great idea, you might have a great plan, you might have done all the homework, but getting those clients and maybe getting the first few clients is something that could be the challenge.
Yes. And Anirudh, may I say this? There are so many very good ideas that have already been thought of. And I'm going to just say that, but are not in practice. So be careful before you invest a great deal of time, effort, money in a good idea. Search the patent literature. Search the patent literature. It's not always easy to find, but there's a ton of very good ideas that have been patented, which means that you don't have freedom to operate. You don't have freedom to use that device or that idea unless you pay the owner of the patent. And or sometimes these ideas, the patent will become abandoned because many times the entrepreneur or the inventor never secured the funds and they just don't renew the patent. What that means is that the idea is now in the public domain. And once it's in the public domain, you cannot own it. You can use it if it's been abandoned and you don't have to pay for it, but it's not something you can claim ownership on, which means that people will, when they're investing in your idea, will recognize that others can copy or reproduce it because you don't own the patent on the method or the device. So just be cautious about how far down the road you go before you secure a patent. I've applied for many patents that have not been issued, and every once in a while I'll get a patent issued and I'll not be able to see it through to fruition, and I'll end up abandoning it, or I'll pay money over a number of years to keep it active, hoping that someday I'll be able to secure money sufficiently to pursue it. So just a word of caution: when you have a good idea, there's a good chance somebody else has already thought of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we have to be in the front of the race and always try to make sure that we have the best resources with us, the best strategies with us, so that we can, whatever the good work we are doing, whatever the innovations that we are doing, need to be reached out to the patients and need to reach out before others do.
Yes. And then there's a lot of very skilled, competent people trying to do the same thing you're doing.
Exactly.
Most likely they're out there. So one thing, you never know your competitors, what they're doing, and it's in their private enterprise activities. When it's not public, you don't know. So you may end up with a very good mousetrap, but they may end up with a better mousetrap. And if their better mousetrap comes out to compete against your good mousetrap, there's a chance yours will not succeed. So these are all part of the risks of medtech development or medical device development.
Absolutely, Jim. This is how we conclude our podcast for today, Jim. This was a fantastic conversation. What stood out to me was like how companies like Trinity Orthopedics are focused not only on innovation itself, but on improving the surgical efficiency and reducing complications. And we also learned the way you're guiding budding entrepreneurs is amazing. You're from your own experience, you are trying to give the best guidance that you could. So I hope
I
Trinity
mean,
reaches
oh,
its goals. And I also
thank you very much.
yeah, and I'm also
Thank you.
hoping whoever all the budding entrepreneurs who are listening to us get some inspiration from here to meet their goals as well.
It was
Thank
my
you, Jim.
pleasure. All the best. You take care. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Jim.